Hello, this is Robert Rickover. I'm an Alexander Technique teacher in Omaha, Nebraska, and my guest today, who will actually be interviewing me, is Imogen Ragone, an Alexander Technique teacher in Wilmington, Delaware. Both of us teach primarily online these days. And our topic today that Imogen's going to interview me about is the value of short Alexander Technique quotes from Alexander himself and often first generation Alexander teachers. What is their usefulness?
Well, I think you've asked your own question, Robert. So thank you for inviting me. Yes.
Yeah.
So why do you think these quotes that many of us have seen you share widely on social media, these quotes from F.M. Alexander, and they're often very short, they're not whole passages.
They're usually quite short.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I will start by, well, first of all, usually they're in the form of a little box that might have a picture of the person, or, they're not just the quotes often, but typically there'll be either a picture and there might be a little indication that this is about the Alexander technique at the bottom. So it's pretty easy to learn more about the technique if someone sees one of these. But let me address a criticism that's come up sometimes when they've been posted on Alexander Technique groups on Facebook.
So you want to go for the criticism before you go for the value? Okay.
I want to go for the criticism very briefly and then go to the value. So the criticism that sometimes happens is people say, well, these are quotes that probably were something this teacher said in a specific situation with a particular pupil, and we don't know the kind of background of what happened before the quote was said. They're just not that, they're not that useful. You've seen that criticism, right? And my take on it is, yes, they are often in the moment quotes coming out of a very specific situation. But I think those in the moment responses are coming from teachers typically with a lot of experience teaching and thinking about the Alexander technique, decades typically. And I think they contain within them the wisdom of those teachers brought to bear perhaps on a particular student at a particular point. But I think they have a huge value in that if you really read them carefully and think about them, they often contain all sorts of, they contain a lot of information that you can unpack from them. I actually regard a lot of those quotes as being kind of treasures of the Alexander technique.
Yeah, can I make another point, actually?
Sure.
It just occurred to me when you're talking about this particular criticism, and another one I've heard is like, which relates to it, is what's the context? Can you give us the exact citation and the whole pattern?
Yeah, they want to know
if it's from a written work, is it, and maybe that's useful to know. I'm sure it is for people who want to delve deeper, but this is also something, just a little quote that might spark someone's interest. It might sound very unusual and against the kind of the conventional wisdom of the day, or something like that. And they create engagement on social media. And
yes,
that is very advantageous.
Agree. Yeah.
If we want to get more publicity for the wonderful Alexander technique?
I was actually going to get to that, but we could go there first.
Sorry.
I see those quotes as almost like a Alexander technique koan, you know, the Japanese little poems that who knows what they mean, but they're often sort of have riddles,
paradoxical, or
and they're designed to kind of wake you up and get you thinking. And I think a lot of these quotes fall in that category. They also fall in the category you mentioned, that someone who knows nothing about the Alexander technique can see one of these quotes and it resonates with them, even if they don't know anything really about this method or about the person being quoted. And they think about it, and it's real easy for them to take the next step and just, oh, Alexander FM Alexander. Sounds like he might be an interesting guy. I'll look him up, you know, or the Alexander technique. So yes, as a marketing tool, which I was kind of leave for last, because I don't want to sound too crass here, but honestly, I think they're an amazing marketing tool. And especially on the internet, where the shorter something is, the better often.
The shorter, and that will then from that short will create engagement, because engagement is what drives social media, basically. So for better or for worse, that's
it. Yeah, that is what drives social media. And there are a lot of, I mean, most of the time I've been posting these on Alexander Technique Facebook pages, but there are a lot of social media platforms that really only work for short things. Well, Twitter is an example. I think Instagram is a pretty good example of that.
Well, Instagram's only images, so obviously they are an image.
They are images.
I mean, they're images and videos, but it's a visual,
short videos and images, or I don't know. I'm not really up on all the new things, but I think in general the people go for the short stuff, and then they want to digest it on their own, or if it's interesting to them, they'll think about it, and if it's not, they'll scroll on to the next thing. But so I see them as kind of almost perfect for today's world, even though a lot of these quotes are like 50, 70, whatever years old. They have that quality.
So what are the other benefits, or what is the other value that you see?
Well, you know, actually, I think we've covered quite a bit of it. We kind of went in a different direction than I was expecting, but I just said that there is this distilled wisdom, and in order to kind of collect that wisdom, you have to do a little mental unpacking of it, and you can get a lot out of some of these quotes by just thinking about them for a while. Just letting them kind of kick around in your brain. Some of them have surprising implications. And to kind of to give away a little bit what our next talk will be about, what I'm hoping to do is, first of all, start a series of short conversations, each one devoted to an Alexander Technique quote.
One of these quotes.
One of these little gems. And I'm going to start with one by Margaret Goldie, Alexander's one of the first people he trained in London. So actually, that pretty much covers what I wanted to talk about. But do you want to say some more about?
Well, I have another question. Is that what would you see as the value of creating these for yourself, or as an Alexander teacher, or someone that's more current in the Alexander community.
Oh, you mean
not so like you've been talking about the kind of the wisdom over the years from Alexander and the first generation teachers especially, but you know, maybe there's a Robert Rickover quote.
Oh, there are going to be I mean, there no reason why there can't be quotes from people who are 2 or 3 generations down the line. It's the ones
who
that
are currently
I mean,
and active.
I would not discount that at all, but most of the ones that I've found that have kind of made their way onto images are from Alexander or first generation teachers, but there's no reason why it couldn't be someone more recent or a student. There's some pretty brilliant quotes from Alexander Technique students who have an experience with the technique, and they manage to distill it nicely in a short.
And in a way that maybe as a teacher who's in all the jargon and has been studying for years would not be able to put it. They wouldn't be,
Some of the best, I mean, the best writing about the technique comes from people who are not Alexander Technique teachers, in my opinion. I mean, best writing in terms of reaching the general public. To me, they come from journalists and from students. Those are the 2 groups that I would find have the most valuable things to say in longer forms, but also perhaps in these short ones.
I'm thinking, I don't want to get us too off topic, and I think we're wrapping this up, but there's also a few nice quotes from celebrities who have been students of the technique.
Some of those celebrity
obviously got another added value because people will have heard of John Cleese or whoever the actor is.
Absolutely. And some of those celebrity quotes have their own life. I mean, there's a whole bunch of them that have kind of been generated by famous quote sites, as it were. So there's about a dozen or more of those that are very useful in this context. I guess another thing in teaching, often there'll be a point in a lesson where, for me anyway, I'll say, well, you know, Alexander had something to say about the very question you just asked, and I'll give you a quote. So they're just useful to have around. I have created a page where I've collected them all, and they're all available. The ones that I know about are all there for anyone who wants to use them. You could use them in a blog, you could use them in your teaching, you could just put them out there.
Just share them on social media. Okay. Thank you, Robert.
Oh, well, thank you. So my guest today has been Imogen Ragone, an Alexander Technique teacher in Wilmington, Delaware. I will put a link to her website, to a website that'll tell you more about the technique in general. And I'll put a link to that page where you can find hundreds of quotes that you can download and use any way you want. So thank you so much for this.
Thank you.